Hi readers, it's Heidi from Bunbury and the Stacks, and it is time for my July Rewind post. This month I've read a ridiculous amount of books in preparation for being away all next month, which means I wasn't on the internet much in July and I won't be on much in August, but I will have a 2-week feature called Booking It Across the US, in which, while I go on a road trip with my boyfriend, I will be posting about books that take place in the states we will be visiting. So I will just give you extremely quick reactions to those books because there will be full reviews of each of them, and I don't want to take up too much time since I did read close to 20 books this month. First up, I listened to the audiobook for The Wednesday Wars by Gary D. Schmidt. This was my New York choice. I adored it. Joel Johnstone narrated. I've only listened to him before in 13 Reasons Why, but his narration is stunning. I will definitely be looking for books by him in the future and highly recommend this one. For New Jersey, I read Tithe by Holly Black. This was, I believe, Holly Black's debut. At least it was her YA debut, if it wasn't her overall debut. I could tell her world building was still amazing, but the character development wasn't quite as on for me. Still, I liked it enough to grab the rest of the series, and we'll be reading it soon. My Pennsylvania book, A Second Chance Summer, I actually covered in last month's Rewind, but I will note that I ended up not really liking it very much. Sorry, all you readers who loved it, just not for me. For Ohio, I listened to the audio for Maybe This Time by Jennifer Cruzy. This was my first Jennifer Cruzy book. I really liked it. It did have a paranormal element because it was a retelling of The Turn of the Screw, and I will definitely be reading more of her books in the future. For Indiana, I picked up and read A Girl of the Limberlost by Jean Stratton Porter. This was my favorite book of the month. It went on my all-time favorite shelf immediately. I, in fact, bought a physical copy after reading the free digital version because I knew I was going to want to pick it up and read. If you enjoy classics of the, Little Women type variety, I highly recommend this one. For Illinois, I picked up a Chicago series I have been meaning to try and started Something About You by Julie James. I've been meaning to read Julie James, like Jennifer Cruzy, for a while. She's one of the contemporary romance authors that gets often recommended to me when I say that I can't get into contemporary romance, and I think I found a winner here. I will definitely be reading the rest of this series as well. Now from Illinois, I'm going to be driving up into Wisconsin, and so for that, I picked up A Reliable Wife by Robert Goulrick. I picked this one up in part, I knew my mother had read it, but didn't really know her reaction to it, and Ashley from Into the Hall of Books, I know, really enjoys this author. I'm sorry, Ashley, I hated this book. I think this was my first 1-star rated book of the year on Goodreads. Really wasn't for me. I wish I had decided to read Dairy Queens or Stupid Fast or something else that takes place in Wisconsin, but I still will have a review up for this one. For Minnesota, I picked up and read Betsy Tacy by Maud Hart Lovelace. Betsy Tacy was recommended to me by both Hannah from So Obsessed With, who loves classics, and Allison from The Allure of Books. Both of them have great taste when it comes to this type of books. I liked it, didn't love it. If I continue on to read the series, I could see myself growing really attached to these characters and loving them over time, but it didn't happen in this first little book. Moving down into South Dakota, I finally picked up Wide Open by Deborah Coates. This one came out last year, and I've really wanted to read it because it is described as kind of a rural fantasy in that it is an urban fantasy type book, but it takes place in a rural region, namely being western South Dakota. I know that area really well. My mother grew up there, and I spent a lot of summers there. I believe the setting was my favorite part of this book. I didn't love the story or the characters, but I could see it getting better. I liked it enough that I think I will pick up the second one. I'm interested. I just really love books set in this region. And finally, for my home state, I picked up Like Mandarin by Kirsten Hubbard. I've wanted to read this one for a while, since knowing it takes place in Wyoming, and not only does it take place in Wyoming, it basically takes place in my hometown. She sets it in a fictional town called Washokie, which kind of makes my heart ache because I'm from Washakie County, so that one kind of hurt my heart that she screwed with that. And not only that, despite the story, which I'm really glad to see a teen book focusing on friendship between girls, no romance, anything like that, I was too close to this one. I could just tell that she hadn't lived in this region, that she didn't really know it the way someone who lived there would, and too many of the details were off, and it just got to me and I couldn't take it. So I think I gave this like 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And finally, I figured that for my road trip I should read a road trip book, and so I listened to the audio for Paper Towns by John Green. I liked it. I didn't enjoy it as much as An Abundance of Catherines, but I probably liked it as much as The Fault in Our Stars, which I don't really like as much as everyone else seems to. So I'd probably put those on par for me. And I will be talking about all of these more in my reviews and my Booking It Across the US feature next month. So for a non-Booking It Across the US books, because I did need a break on occasion, I read Gunnerkrud Court, Volumes 1, 2, and 3 by Thomas Siddell. This is a wonderful graphic novel series. The 4th volume just came out. I still haven't picked it up, but plan to soon. It's based off a webcomic, so you can read it all for free online if you prefer. Luckily, I was able to get the hard copies from my library. This one was pitched to me from Flannery of the Read Venture as Harry Potter with science and mythology, and I'll kind of leave it at that for you because that's what it is. I do have a series review up for this. I'll link it below. I didn't get into it immediately, but I soon realized that it was really impressive and has so much depth, especially for a webcomic. It really builds off itself and gets the ball rolling and harkens back to things that happened early on, and you can tell that Thomas Siddell really has a plan, which isn't often the case with webcomics. They can just be kind of fun and random and different every week and unrelated, but this one is not. This one definitely has an overarching, very complicated storyline that is really panning out well, and I definitely recommend it. Next up, you may remember I did a Friday Reads vlog a couple weeks ago for Six Gun Snow White by Catherine M. Valenti. I did finish that one. It was only a novella, so it didn't take much. I loved it so much. Her language and word structure is beautiful. It's a book that just begs to be read out loud. I would love to hear it on audio. And if you are into fairy tales at all, I certainly recommend picking it up. It is not like a YA retelling. It's definitely an adult retelling of Snow White. But I put her up there with my favorite Snow Whites, like from Shannon Maguire's Indexing and Bill Willingham's Fables. So that's a huge compliment. No surprise here because it's Cat Valenti. Then I listened to the audio for The Curse of the Wendigo by Rick Yancey. This is the 2nd book in the Monstrumologist series, so I won't say anything with any spoilers. I will say that I did like it, but I didn't love it like I did the first book. The story wasn't enough for me to mask the fact that I don't like any of the characters in this book. It took me about, halfway to 3/4 of the way through for that to really strike me as, oh, that's why I'm not digging this, is I don't like anyone. I don't like the narrator. I don't like the monstrumologist. He's a narcissistic creep, which makes for an interesting character to read about, particularly in the stories they get into, but it doesn't make him likable, which wouldn't be such a bad thing. Last time I had Jack Kearns, the character, was, again, absolutely horrible person, but I loved the character. I loved reading about him, and that really carried the story for me. And in this one, I didn't have that person to grab onto, so I just had that really exciting, heart-pounding, nauseating plot, which is not a bad thing at all. I still really enjoyed it, and I'm going to listen to the rest of the series, but I just, I recognize that it is not without its flaws. Next up, I read Discount Armageddon by Shannon McGuire. This is the first book in her Encrypted series. I do have a mini review up for this, which I'll link below. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I can definitely see why people who never got into the October Daye series, which is more sedate and serious, really got into this one. It has a fast pace from the start. It's very fun and light and crazy and unexpected, and I'm not as attached to it as I am the October Daye series. I don't know that I ever will be, but I definitely really enjoy it. I believe she has one more book in the series focusing on Verity, and then she's going to move on to other members of the Price family, and I really like how she's doing that. I think that's a pretty cool setup for a series, so I will definitely be sticking with Encrypted. I also read the graphic novel Genius by Steven Seagal and Teddy Christensen. Sorry, I couldn't remember his first name of the artist. I really liked the art style in this one. It's a really kind of quiet, unassuming story. There's not a lot of action. It's largely about Einstein and this idea that Einstein had and never told anybody, and this guy trying to figure out what it was, and then he finds out what it is, and the effect that that has on him and his life. So if you're into scientific theory, anything like that, this is a good one to pick up. I know that my boyfriend mentioned he used to read Steven Seagal's comics back in the 90s. I think he wrote for X-Men. And so he is an established author, but I think this was something quite different for him. Lastly, I listened to the audiobook Bone Crossed by Patricia Briggs. This is the 4th book in the Mercy Thompson series. Hopefully I'll get a review or a mini review up for this one soon as well. It was a bit of a come down for me after Iron Kist, which is only fair. There almost needed to be. It couldn't keep escalating at the same rate that Iron Kist was. That was such an emotional gut punch of a listen for me. And so I didn't enjoy it quite as much, but of course I still really liked it. I'm a big fan of this series. In this one, she kind of took Mercy out of her home base and made it more about her and less about the dynamics between her and Adam and Sam and all these characters we've come to know, though don't worry, they're there too. So I did really enjoy it, and I will be definitely picking up the next book soon, probably to listen to on my road trip. And so that's it for me for July. I know it was a lot. Thanks for bearing with me. You can see my favorite books of July linked below, and let me know what you loved this month.